Hey guys, welcome back. It is Monday, the 22nd, and a little hiatus for me. Nothing crazy, just work stuff. And when it comes to, I guess this and work, it's always going to be, my own personal sanity versus being able to put out content. But anyway, I apologize for the absence. Back in the saddle again. Hope you guys had a good weekend. This podcast will be dropping on a Monday as opposed to a weekend, but it is what it is. This will also mirror the blog. Go ahead and check it out on the zencop.com. It's a good one. As usual, like, subscribe, comment, and share. It's gaining some traction in a good way. So thank you if you have been forwarding or sharing or reposting. I appreciate that. All Gotham, no Batman. Why major cities across the United States are being overrun by criminals and crime. We're kind of in a weird spot right now. Overall, right? I feel like things are far from better, but I kind of try to peel the onion back for certain things, and this being one of the thicker of the onions that we're dealing with. But if we were to explore the world of crime and punishment on an international level, we would see a variety of tactics and legal systems varying from extremes to completely lawless societies, right? From beheadings to multi-generational prison sentences, there really is no limit to what the legality system is capable of on the international level. But in some of those extremist, quote unquote extremist style countries, is there a criminal enterprise within that country that is successful? Or are certain crimes almost non-existent because of the laws that exist, or more importantly, the punishments that are set in place? And I would say it's a little bit of both. While there are a lot of countries who still use public displays of violence as a means of legal punishment, is that tactic something that promotes fear, or is that a tactic that promotes a polite society? Right? There's currently 14 countries that still utilize capital punishment in the world, and the U.S. is one of them. Some countries like Russia, they have abolished capital punishment under a moratorium. Unlike South America, some countries over there, they have abolished capital punishment entirely, with the exception of wartime executions. And there's another small group of countries who don't have any type of capital punishment, executions, anything like that. Totally gone. Countries like Canada is a big one. But the major difference that I think sets them apart, aside from the method, is the legal system within that country, and specifically due process. There is something to be said about due process and what we have afforded to us in the United States. It's definitely not perfect, but we are not quick to remove your hand via sword for shoplifting, right? And I've said this many times before, but if there are some of you out there who feel that this country does not afford you fair and impartial treatment in the arena of the legal system, I strongly encourage you to visit various parts of the world, break the law, and then write me, because you're probably not going to be getting out anytime soon. And I assure you, the two of us will not be sitting down for a cup of coffee to discuss your findings. But I will be the very first to acknowledge that the United States does have a lot of pitfalls and challenges when it comes to the legal system. And not to be the dead horse, but I've also yet to find its equal in the realm of international law and order. And with the legal system being fairly consistent in terms of its foundation, then I guess the question I would have is, why are we at an all-time high for violent crimes, homicide, property crimes, organized crimes, drug-related deaths, and then drug-related crimes, right? The answer is pretty simple, and that the answer is we keep voting for it. And more importantly, we have the government leaders and their cohorts who keep writing it. And the argument could be made that, the votes are what count and the people should decide. And totally, 100% agree. The people should decide. But that decision is based solely on what is being supplied as the options for said people, right? Even more important than the vote is what is being advertised when it comes to the actual verbiage of the measure itself, right? So let's go back in time. Excuse me. We're going to go back in time to 2014. This was a very important year for California. We were on the rebound from a recession. Life was pretty good. Staffing for law enforcement was plentiful, and we were slowly growing back to the point of being able to control the safety of our streets once again. And the criminal element in California wasn't completely in check, but there was definitely a tight grasp on the throat of evil. And in the fall of 2014, many Californians would cast their vote for a proposition that was called the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act. The name itself was enough for most people to say, yeah, sounds great, let's do it. Who would say no to that, right? The proposition, the details were as follows. Proposition 47, a law that will change certain low-level crimes from potential felonies to misdemeanors. The savings from reduced incarceration costs will be invested into drug and mental health treatment. I'm reading this verbatim. Programs for at-risk students in K through 12 schools and victim services. Individuals with a prior felony record for any of the following low-level non-violent offenses or who are currently serving time for the following crimes may qualify to change their record or their sentence to a misdemeanor. And it's the following. Simple drug possession, petty theft under 950, shoplifting under 950, forgery under 950, writing a bad check under 950, and receipt of stolen property under 950, 950 being the $950 amount. Individuals who are currently incarcerated for offenses committed in the state of California that are impacted by Proposition 47 can seek to be resentenced and released. This is known as resentencing. Individuals who have been previously convicted of these felonies for crimes committed in the state of California can apply to have them changed on their record to misdemeanors. This is known as reclassification. Removal of a felony record can reduce immigration consequences and help remove barriers to jobs, housing, and stability. End quote. That's the crux of the proposition there. And the objective was to essentially save and reallocate millions of dollars by relaxing and altering laws and punishments under the assumption that the offenders would comply completely with the expectations of a civilized and crime-free society. Now, nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared us for what the passing of this legislation did and what it would do for California. Here we are 8 years later, and we could pick any catastrophic topic that we are currently facing as an issue in the state of California, and there would be a very quick and readily identifiable association to the passing of Prop 47. I mean, even using the word safe schools in modern days is a complete joke. Our schools are the most dangerous they've ever been. Record high violence, record high drug use, and record high drug-related deaths. In addition to the crime stats, our streets surrounding those schools are plagued with homeless encampments and overall filth. There's nothing safe about it. And one of the major issues we saw with the passing of Prop 47 and the months and the years that followed was the dollar amounts that were associated to the crimes, right? So a lot of cops started to notice, hey, what's up with this 950 thing? These guys seem to know exactly what they're doing. And we started to see that most of these criminals had itemized lists for the organized retail theft written down ahead of time so they did not exceed 950. Or when they were trying to cash a stolen check, they would leave it in the ballpark of 900-ish and change, usually 900 and below. Or when they would steal or obtain stolen goods, it was all under 950. Why? Because they knew they won't be charged with a felony. And in some counties, they knew they wouldn't even be charged at all. We quite literally gave criminals a roadmap as to how to avoid going to prison, evade prosecution and formal probation, and still make money. All the while, we did absolutely nothing to stop it. And the result? Well, tax bases going to zero, communities suffering, and businesses leaving the state, giving Sacramento the finger on the way out the door. These retail stores, they are multi-million-dollar companies. They can deal with the ebb and flow of loss, right? They know what they're doing. Since the pandemic though, retail theft has skyrocketed, and business owners are starting to see the financial impact. And any good investor or business owner knows when, the quote unquote cost of doing business starts to become a true loss of profit, well, they're going to get out and as quickly as possible. And in that scenario, not only did you lose the tax base, but you also lost the jobs, employability, and eventually that affects the community. And community members will have to make a choice, and most of them are going to choose to leave. And before you know it, what was once a beautiful city by the bay, full of businesses, both large and small, culture, fun, tourism, and an amazing place to visit, is now one of the most dangerous places to go in California. I'm born and raised in California. San Francisco was a fun place to go. When I was younger, we would go all the time. When I was older, we would go all the time. And only until probably in the last 10 years, realistically, maybe the last 5 for the really bad stuff, but it's just become a really bad place to go. You don't want to go there anymore. It's just horrible. Gotham, right? No Batman. And with SFPD having their hands tied, they're really just watching the city burn, literally and figuratively. Now, what was interesting about the funding that Prop 47 passed, now that we're on the topic of homelessness and drug use, the funding that was going to be rerouted or allocated was a good thing, right? It was going to go to all these drug and rehab programs, which is great. However, when you have a wait list that's 6 to 9 months, it's completely unrealistic. And those are the people who want to get help, which is far and few between. And I agree that Prop 47 did not create this homeless epidemic overnight. It did, however, create a direct shot highway to get there. And Prop 47 did, in turn, create a lot more homeless within the state. And the longevity and the issue that we're facing now is trying to revert that. And it was a slow, gradual process, but once that ball got rolling, it would be impossible to stop it. And that big rolling ball was a disgusting combination of heroin, property crimes, and an unsecured border. And in the years following the passing of Prop 47, heroin was moving into California more consistently and aggressively than any other drug on the market. It was cheap, it was abundant, and it was one of the most addictive narcotics on the market. And unlike its cohorts, heroin's an opioid. Unlike meth, you didn't stay awake all night long dismantling a VCR. It was a very, very, very destructive drug that just sort of turned you into this slug. And we would see a record high in the years that followed of opioid-related deaths, right? Drug-related criminal activity in a homeless population that was almost completely addicted to or at one point consistently used heroin. We tried to implement Suboxone programs. We tried to implement clinics. None of it was able to, I shouldn't say it didn't work. It couldn't work because the demand was too high. It was too much. The tidal wave was too big. And when we saw the drug epidemic climbing just with heroin alone, it got worse, and worse. And before we knew it, we lost control. And we asked ourselves, how could it possibly get worse? Well, little did we know, synthetic drugs would soon enter the proverbial chat. And that's when we get into fentanyl. And fentanyl was the deadly icing on the cake for an already horrific and out of control homeless population. But it's very important to remember that Jerry Brown was the architect of Prop 47. His predecessor, Governor Newsom, still sings its praises. You'll still hear him talk about how great it is, and it's the coolest thing ever. Prop 47 has done great things for California. But Governor Newsom still to this day will not truly address the growing homelessness and drug epidemic that we have been facing for almost a decade. He will also never address the direct correlation between illegal drugs and homelessness, and more importantly, the drugs that cross the border every day. And a lot of people don't want to go down that road because they think it's political, but it's not. the illegal drugs that cross our border so consistently and so freely, it's a free for all, and we're not seeing any success in that regard. It's making everything 10 times worse. And in actuality, Governor Newsom always talks about how we're making progress, but when you look at the data, like the quantifiable data, it's been an increase every year for the past 7 years, with 2022 being the worst, where we saw a 30% increase in homelessness. Nothing is changing at all. And in hindsight, if we look at Prop 47 and we look at where we are right now, we didn't pass a Safe Schools Act as a state. We passed a hand-developed criminal marketing system that has grown into a now out-of-control drug and criminal enterprise with homelessness on every street corner, and that's the visual blight that everyone hates. And we ask ourselves, well, how much worse will things get before we see any real efforts to address the core or root issues, right? And I consider myself to be an optimist. I think most people are, and that's respectable. But I think that now we kind of have to look at things from a very realistic standpoint. I used to believe that things couldn't get worse, and now that we're here, we are where it's worse. So what will it look like in 10, 15, 20 years from now if we continue down this dark and dangerous road, right? The important thing to remember is that any sort of change will never come from a societal level. I should say any sort of real change will never come from a societal level. And those efforts, they're admirable, and I think it's great that a lot of people are trying to help, but it will never make a large enough impact to inflict change on the state level. And any real efforts that will carry significant change, it has to come from the state and local government level. And in that scenario, there's only, three options that I think are on the table. I'm sure there's more, but if we gave ourselves three bullets, right? The first one would be for Californians to stop allowing leftists or otherwise liberal policies to come to the table. We all know that's not going to happen, not anytime soon, if ever. It's the way it is. Option 2, bullet 2, Californians vote Democrat leaders out of office. Also probably not going to happen, if ever. Now, number 3, that's where we need to get. Californians vote on what is best for the law-abiding, tax-paying, safety-seeking citizens of the state of California, and further, we stop letting political allegiance to the Democratic Party prevent you from saying that we are not where we should be right now, and it is completely unacceptable as a state. Now, option 3 is where we need to get. In that scenario, full disclosure, I'm an independent. I have been for a long time. I don't care who you voted for. I don't care what political party you are associated to. None of that matters, or at least it shouldn't, in the realm of cleaning up our streets. Politics has become such a portion of our personal identity, both right and left, that we have lost sight of the fact that we can still agree on what is morally ethical for our children's futures, and we give political leaders way too much power. It's just a fact. We give them way too much power. And where we are right now as a state is a perfect example of blindly following political leadership based on party allegiance. And if we aren't careful, our options will become fewer and fewer before we have no more options, and life just is what it is, carnage and all. Now, just one thing that I want to really make clear is that if you had the ability to remove political allegiance from a conversation, right? We ditch that and we sit down, and let's say you have a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, every single possible party member in the same room, sitting at the same table. The likelihood of all of them agreeing that they want their kids to be able to play outside safely until the street lights come on is almost a guarantee, right? We're all going to want that. We need to get back to the basics of human interaction and making decisions based on public safety, and eventually, we will find success. If we keep going down the road we are with the opinions we have currently set in stone for most people, it's just not going to work. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I'm not holding my breath. Guys, thank you so much for listening. On Instagram, The Zen Cop. If you're listening right now, you're on YouTube. Twitter, The Zen Cop, and www.thezencop.com is the website. Thank you guys for listening. I genuinely appreciate it. looking forward to some new content coming up in the next few months. And then I know I've been promising for a long time, but it's just a matter of me getting to it. Guests on the show, I would really like to start that before the end of the year. Got some great ideas, some great people, and some great stories that I hopefully can bring your way soon. All right, guys, take care. Have a great week. See you next time.